Good morning, folks. I hope you've all had a very good week. Now, I'm acutely aware that when I do these Sunday morning broadcasts, these short broadcasts, I tend to focus on sort of negatives in society, issues that need dealing with. And of course, that's why I do it, because there are issues that need dealing with. But there are a couple of upbeat, good news stories that I'd like to start with this week. The first is the brilliant victory of Allison Pearson over Essex Police, who, after her campaign, rightly dropped their investigation into her. And just to remind those who weren't familiar with the episode, Allison had tweeted something shortly after the 7th of October 2023 massacre in Israel, and she took it down an hour later when she realized it was in error, and someone noted it. They reported it to the police. After a year-long investigation, they turned up on her doorstep and accused her of a non-crime hate incident, which, by the way, I think is a criminal activity, even though they call it a non-crime hate incident. Or maybe it's just an incident while they investigate you, who knows? But it's two policemen turning up at your doorstep in a Kafkaesque situation, saying you tweeted something, you said something, which actually they didn't like, which they think isn't morally correct. And now most people, and this is where I think Allison is amazing, most people on the receiving end of two policemen on a Sunday morning, accusing them of a non-crime criminal incident, would probably want to just curl up in a ball and disappear. Allison didn't do that. She had the courage to stand up and fight them. Of course, she had the privilege of a voice with which to do that, but she mounted a successful campaign against them. And I want to applaud Allison for the courage she had to stand up against the entire establishment, against these ridiculous hate speech laws, and to win. But at the same time, I want us all to remember the many other people who have been on the end of similar investigations by the police, including children as young as 9 years old, as I mentioned in last week's broadcast, and perhaps don't have the courage to resist the temptation of curling up in a ball and disappearing. I know I would. I'd absolutely wish to disappear if the police turned up on my doorstep. I can't think of anything more frightening than being accused of a non-crime criminal incident, if that isn't absolutely absurd in the way that I've just described it. But there are also people who want to fight the injustices in our society, but don't have the voice that Allison had. And it's up to people like myself and others, and I'm sure Allison will be right there at the forefront, to continue to fight for their free speech. And I know, by the way, that Allison will continue, having been bitten by this hate speech law, she will continue to fight against it. And it's a very, very worthy fight. It's a hop and a skip, by the way, from these non-crime hate incidents, from this hate speech law to blasphemy law. And Yvette Cooper more or less said that this week. She said she would be using this law to try and shut down anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. She should not be doing it. We should be fighting that with all our might. There is no room in the society, no room in democracy to shut down free debate about ideology, religion, or any other matter. We must continue the fight that Allison has led us on this week. But well done, Allison. The other people I want to commend this week are the farmers who, on the receiving end of a ridiculous law, new tax law, the change in inheritance tax, which will break up family farms, which will break up an already very demanding industry into one that actually will cease to operate, because there won't be people prepared to step into their shoes to continue to farm at very low margins. It's a tough job being a farmer. Make no mistake, it's not an easy life. Up at 5 a.m. every morning in the cold, like we were on the protest earlier this week, doing all of that for a very small amount of money. And by the way, do you know why they get paid a very small amount of money, the farmers? It all goes back 20 years. They've been on the receiving end of bad government policy ever since supermarkets were allowed to turn into hypermarkets, giving these purchasers like Tesco, Sainsbury's and others massive economies of scale, allowing them therefore to squeeze down farmers' profitability for the benefit of the consumer. And it doesn't end there for farmers. They've also been on the receiving end of really bad policy through common agricultural policy. And we, the country, the people, have been exposed to this bad policy by the offshoring of the growing of our food. We can't buy stuff. We don't grow stuff in this country completely independently. We are now food dependent on other countries as a result of bad policy. And if that wasn't bad enough, of course, the farmers have also been on the receiving end of the massive increase in cost that comes from net zero. The cost of their fertilizer has gone up as a result, the cost of their fuel. And then they employ people, and they've also had to suffer the increase in national insurance that Rachel Reeves delivered to the country recently, plus the increase in minimum wage, etc., etc., etc. The farmers have been trod on dreadfully by the government, and the inheritance tax change law is going to be perhaps the straw that breaks the back, because it will mean the end of patrician generation to generation farming, which is so crucial for our food supplies. But I want to commend the farmers on a brilliant protest, even though we were tightly held in Whitehall and Parliament Square, kettled effectively during the protest. It went off in that quintessentially brilliant British way, just politely making our case. And rather like the free speech case that Allison fought and which must continue to be fought, we must continue to fight for the farmers. It mustn't end with that one protest. We haven't done our job. We've got to keep talking about them. And while we're at it, we must also talk about all the small and medium-sized businesses that also have been handed down generation to generation through families, which will not survive their breakup because of the same inheritance tax change in inheritance tax laws which the farmers have been subjected to. So we will continue that fight. But the other really big news, and I don't think there's any good news coming out of this story, is Starmer's ridiculous decision to allow Zelensky to fire British Storm Shadow missiles into Russian territory. And I'll tell you why it's a bad decision. It's a bad decision for this reason. If Putin should use it as an excuse to launch an attack on the United Kingdom, what he will now be able to say to his people is that it was the Brits and the Americans who first fired missiles at Russia. We didn't fire missiles at them. They fired missiles at us. And as wrong as you might think that claim is by Putin, it will allow him with the Russian people to claim the moral high ground. He will be able to say, we were attacked with British armaments in Russia. So far, Western policy has been to arm up Zelensky as much as Zelensky wants, and I've got some issues with that, but arm up Zelensky as much as he wants in order to protect Ukraine. Now it's different. Zelensky has invaded Russia. He's taken a portion of it called the Kursk region, and missiles are being fired, British missiles are being fired into Russia to support that initiative. This is real escalation in that theatre of war. What we've seen is an invasion of Russia by Ukraine, and that may or may not be justified. It may be a clever tactical decision to distract the Russian troops from the Donetsk region into Kursk, but it is an escalation. And on the back of that, the Russians escalated by, perhaps wrongly, no doubt wrongly, getting North Korean troops to come to Russia and fight alongside them, making the conflict international. And now we have made it even more international by allowing our missiles to be fired into sovereign Russian territory. This is escalation. This is escalation at a time when actually there's about to be a change in presidency in the United States, and we're going to get a president who said he's going to bring peace to Russia. And I cannot help but think that Biden and Starmer are trying to undermine Trump by taking this decision now. There was no reason to do it. Extremely difficult decision to make, extremely detrimental decision in my view. And to do it at a time when the United Kingdom's own armaments, own military, is a shadow of its former self. On the same day that we heard missiles had been fired into Russia, we were told that our military was being cut back by £500 million a year by the redundancy of 2 frigates, the redundancy of a whole load of drones and helicopters, precisely the kinds of weapons that we might need if we do end up in a hot war with Russia, God forbid. Extremely irresponsible behaviour by Keir Starmer. And I can't help but think this man is a first-class idiot, firing our missiles into Russia when Trump may just bring peace to the region, making it more difficult for Trump and escalating the situation there. All at the same time, by the way, of Starmer endorsing the International Criminal Court's decision to issue an arrest warrant for Netanyahu. Netanyahu, by the way, who is an elected prime minister, democratically elected prime minister, cannot be held accountable for the state of Israel. It's the state of Israel that has done whatever it's done in Gaza. It shouldn't be him that's being arrested by the ICC. Completely politicized decision. Starmer so silly to get on that bandwagon, but particularly silly when you think about the geopolitical implications of what Starmer's doing. At a time when Iran is supporting Russia, when Russia's potentially wishing to expand its sphere of war, we are attacking someone, Netanyahu, who's keeping a lid on Iran. Iran is Russia's ally. If you're going to fire British missiles into Russia, at least allow Israel to do what it needs to do to keep a lid on Iran. Israel is fighting a war on three fronts, against Hamas, against Hezbollah, and against Iran. These are things that are helpful to the British position, particularly if we're going to challenge Russia on Russian sovereign territory. Bad thinking by Starmer. And the other thing I just want to finish on is Starmer will no doubt use this escalation in Russia and Putin's threat now of attacking the United Kingdom and perhaps using nuclear weapons. He'll no doubt use it as an excuse to sidle up to the EU and get into the European Defence Union. And make no mistake, the European Defence Union is not like NATO, where we come together as independent sovereign states wishing to cooperate. It would be the United Kingdom basically taking orders from Brussels. And Brussels is bad. Brussels is bad on every front. Its foreign policy is awful. Brussels is effectively pro-Iran. Brussels supports the International Criminal Court against Netanyahu. The International Criminal Court itself is a Europhilic court, a bit like the European Court of Human Rights. We need joined up thinking in our government. We shouldn't have launched those missiles. If we are going to launch those missiles, for goodness sake, don't be attacking a country which is supporting us in keeping a lid on Iran. And please build up British defences. Do not put them at risk, further at risk, by joining the European Defence Union. And we need to continue saying what I've just said. Please, people, if you take anything away from this little video, take these three things away. Democracy can't exist without freedom of speech. We need to continue that fight. The United Kingdom can't combat a foreign power without food security, domestic food security. Please support our farmers. We can't combat a foreign power without a strong, independent military. Do not let Starmer continue to weaken our military and take it into the European Defence Union. 3 messages. Let's keep up the fight, folks. Have a great Sunday. Thank you very much.